So we have John Dore with us this evening, and he's going to be sharing the history behind the lapel master panels. And those were used to create the original stainless steel body panels for the DeLorean. John acquired them from someone that worked at the shop that designed the original stamping. And he's here to carry on the history and share with us the story on how he acquired them and how they were made and all that good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I don't know how much anybody knows about the company Lapple, but I figured I'd give a brief history of it first, and ask me any questions, and I may or may not know the answer, but I'll give it a shot. But essentially, DeLorean, not just for the body panels, but for a lot of the parts, outsourced the manufacturing of those parts or bought off-the-shelf parts. They didn't manufacture the body themselves; they actually subcontracted that out to Lapple, which is a German company. So kind of a brief history of Lapple. So set up in 1919 in Germany by August Lapple. In 1974, they opened a plant in Carlow in Ireland. So you can see on the map, the lower left side is, or the red dot on the lower half of the screen is where the Lapple plant was, and then the red dot on the top of the screen is where the DeLorean factory was in Dunmurry. So between 74 and 80, they were quite a small outfit. I think they only had like 20 people working there or something like that, until they got the contract to build the DeLorean body panels, and they also built the body dies that were used to stamp out those body panels. The Lapple company survived the bankruptcy of DeLorean, and they continued on in the Carlow location to manufacture parts for Ford, Mercedes, Porsche, BMW, etc. And then unfortunately in 2007, they shut down for good in Carlow with a loss of 350 jobs. So this is just a screen grab from Street View. So that's the Lapple plant. It still stands today. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, what company's in there now, but up until 2007 anyway, they were still manufacturing car parts in there. So these are the machines that they would have used to press the body panels on the DeLorean. So these huge presses that they could load the dies into the mouth here, and it would come down and hit the flat stainless steel sheets that had come from BSE in England. And they would form essentially the DeLorean body panel by pressing the shape here. So and again, I'm not sure how much of this you guys may or may not know, but the DeLorean doors, for example, are probably the most complex panel. And I think there's something like, at least 10 different stampings that go into each door, maybe up to about 14 or 15 different pieces. So you can see here, the upper, and the lower pieces of the door and the side impact bar that's inside in each one of our doors. So that hefty looking piece at the bottom. So all of these panels were built in the factory in Carlow and then shipped by road every day. There was a truck that basically left the Carlow factory and drove up to Belfast, unloaded the parts that had been made, and then came back again and picked up another batch, and this continued every day. The doors themselves were delivered to the factory unassembled, so in component form like this, and at the factory. So the next couple of pictures are basically pictures from the DeLorean factory itself, where they had a sub-assembly line to actually build the doors out of those component parts and weld them together. So over the next couple of pictures, you can see, the inner structures of the door here that have been welded together. And you can see the outline of the door here where they would lie it in place to hold it while they do the welding. Here you can see the crimping that they did when they put the stainless steel skin and married that to the inner structure of the door. And then you can see some finished door structures here just waiting to be picked up and hung on the lines to be put on one of the cars. And then you can see some, oh, I'm sorry, I went back too far. So you can see some guys here, what they're doing is then fitting as they're hanging in this position, I think what they're doing is putting the door locks and all the mechanism on the inside of the door. Here you can see one of the factory workers holding the components, again, that would have been assembled in the factory, but would have been manufactured by the plant in Carlow. So then to the topic of what I'm talking about here tonight, the master panels. So what are they? So if you think about any manufacturing plant, doesn't matter what you're making, you know, you'll make many prototypes and you'll tweak it and refine the design until you get to a design that everybody is satisfied it meets all the specifications. So in DeLorean's case, what they did was they made these panels and they tweaked them and refined the dies and so on until they had a set of all the components that Lapple was going to produce. And they met with the DeLorean engineers and they inspected them and then they signed off on each individual piece. And they would have been each labeled with a sticker like this. Unfortunately, these weren't stored very well for a very long time. So you can see that the stickers are kind of damaged. Some are better than others, but for each one, you can see the component name is at the top line. So Dore inner, and then the drawing number. So from the blueprint, what piece that is. And then there's, unfortunately, this isn't a great example of one. There are some better ones that I have, but there's signatures on the very bottom line and signatures about who inspected it and signed off. And so all of these are signed both by DeLorean engineers and by Lapple engineers. So these were then kept throughout the DeLorean production run. These were kept at the Lapple factory as a reference set of panels. So, through multiple panels being built through these really expensive dies that they had at the factory, the dies would get worn over time and the parts would start to go out of spec. So they would use these as a reference set of panels to place them in the dies and make sure that they fit well and that the parts coming off compared to the standard that was agreed to the master panels. So for that reason, these master panels never went to the factory in Belfast. They stayed in the factory in County Carlow in Ireland. When the DeLorean factory closed, the Lapple kept in business, and actually what they did, which I thought was really cool, was that they hung these panels on the wall of their factory in County Carlow, and they hung there for about another 15 years or so, along with panels that they made for other cars like BMW and so on. So they kind of made a display of everything that their company had produced, right? So kind of a growing display over the years. So in 2004, so the 30th anniversary of Lapple opening its plant in Carlow, obviously long after DeLorean had gone bankrupt, but they invited the Irish DeLorean owners to attend this open day. So they, wanted to celebrate some of the work that they had done in the past. So this is a picture of two of the club members' cars from Ireland sitting outside the Lapple factory in Carlow. As I said, this is actually a picture from, I believe, GMC Houston, but this is the way they would have shipped the panels up to Belfast in these crates. So they would build these crates and put them on trucks and bring them up. You guys are probably also aware, maybe not, but what happened to the expensive body dies when DeLorean went out of business. So they were unfortunately seen as nothing more than scrap value. So they were sold to a fishing company in Ireland, off the west coast of Ireland, called Emerald Fisheries. And they were loaded onto a boat called the Severn Princess, and they were basically thrown overboard into the Atlantic Ocean to be served as anchors for fishing nets. And that's where they sit to this day. So this is the final resting place of them. They're actually just sitting just off the shore there. This is this is the closest I could get it from a Google Street View, but essentially that's just out in that bay there. That's where the DeLorean body dies sit today. Let me just go back here. From Google Earth, you can actually see, and I'm sharing the coordinates here as well, so you guys can look this up if you like, but you can actually see the fishing nets. So you see those circles in the water? I don't know if that's coming through, but that's essentially the fishing nets that these body dies are holding down to this day. Some of the pictures that were taken a couple of years ago when some divers went down to inspect them, you can see that they've become home to some of the fish and lobster and so on. So he was a lobster that's living inside in the DeLorean body dying. He probably has no idea what it is. And then also, I was just while I was putting this together, I thought I'd look up the boat, and basically the boat that they were thrown off. Here's a picture of it when it was in service back in the 60s and 70s, and where it sits right now. So even that boat is kind of neglected and feeling the ravages of time. But there is actually a group that plans on restoring that boat, so that'd be kind of cool if they manage to pull that off. So what happened to master panels? So that's the background of them. I ended up getting to know the press shop manager, a guy called Michael O'Leary, in Ireland. I actually was, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I on the Irish DeLorean owners website, I had interviewed him, just to kind of get this history that I'm sharing with you guys now, because it was really interesting that I actually lived very close to this plant in Carlow, maybe about 10 minutes drive away, essentially, when I lived in Ireland. So Michael invited me down to his house, and I had a great conversation with himself and his wife, Margaret. I had a lovely evening together talking about the history of all of this, and that's a whole separate interview that I've published on the DeLorean website for Ireland. I think Tiffany's posting the link there, so thanks for that. But at the end of it, Michael said to me that he's actually had these panels in his shed for a number of years, and he offered them to me, and it was a really generous gesture. And I told him I'll mind them, and I'll give them a good home and try and show them to people when I can. And maybe someday if a proper DeLorean physical museum is ever built, I think this is the kind of thing that would be really cool to put in them. So luckily we have Michael to thank that these even exist to this day, because as I said, the factory in Carlow hung these on the wall of the factory, but started running out of room. And so around, I think, the early 1990s, one day they just took all these panels down and they threw them in the garbage. So he saw this happening, and he actually jumped in and pulled them back out and took them home to his house, and then put them in his shed for a number of years, until I met him, and now here they sit in my shed. So that's where they are today. That's the bare Dore skin that would have been, obviously we all recognize that. That's the outside of the Halloween door. So, am I in frame? So, I guess you guys have probably never seen the Dore skin without everything else on it, but that's the inside of it. So, just a very bare Dore skin. So then the lower piece of the door is this piece here, and you can see one of the stickers is on it. So all of these would have been welded together at the factory, as I said, to build one door. This piece is pretty heavy. This is like 4 mil thick stainless steel. So this is this is good to know. This is inside all of our doors. So if you ever get hit from a side impact, there's a very heavy side impact bar inside your door that you really can't see when the door is all fitted out. But yeah, so our doors would be a lot lighter if they didn't include this bit. And then that bit is the upper door skin. So again, you can see it's just formed from one piece of stainless steel and stamped just like that at the factory in Carlow. And there's a couple of other smaller panels that would have been welded on here to give additional structure and support. Sorry, at the top of it. So I do have some smaller panels that would have filled this shape as well above your head. And so each piece is actually kind of flimsy when you pick it up like this. So it really only gains all its strength when it's all welded together.
Did they have to do anything different to stamp stainless steel?
They did. They had. I'm thinking back to what Michael told me when I spoke to him, but they tried all sorts of different things because the stainless wouldn't flow. Let's say, so when you hit it with the press, basically you're trying to get the metal to flow into all the crevices, right? And yeah, the stainless obviously has very different properties than aluminium or regular steel. So they tried I think first of all, they tried having a plastic wrapping on it, like a blue plastic sheet, and they would leave that on while they'd hit it. But then what they were finding was that the blue sheet was breaking up into little pieces, and they'd have to pick that off the stainless. It was too time consuming. I think what Michael said to me, and it's in the interview, but in the end, I think they used kind of a dry powder to stop it from sticking to the surfaces of the die so that it would flow better.
Okay.
And that was it in the end.
So do you think the other panels are out there for like the hood or the fenders, the master panels for those, or did those end up in the dumpster?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. So what Michael had was basically the full set of the gull-wing doors and the T panel as well. So I have the master T panel over there as well.
Was it common to sell the dies to throw them in the ocean? Like, were there other cars parts down there? I mean, I understand there's so much like lore about that was being done out of spite versus just recovering money and everything else. But did that, like that picture of that boat had a bunch of cars on it? Was that reef stuff, or was it a ferry, or?
Yeah, so it was a ferry. So the reason it was called the Severn Princess is that it was a ferry used to cross the Severn River in the UK in Chepstow.
Okay.
But it was I've never been there, so I'm not really familiar with the area. But I think it's a pretty wide river, so it took them years to actually build a bridge. But once they built the bridge, there's now the Severn Bridge is there, and that's when they retired the ferry. So, but yeah, it was just used to basically ferry cars across a river, or across a wide river.
Got it.
But as far as other car companies' body dies getting thrown in the ocean, no, I think that's quite unique. But from who knows? I'm sure we've all heard different stories about whether it was intentional or whatever. But from the guys I've spoken to at Lapple and Michael and any of the ex-DeLorean employees, I think most people accept that it wasn't malicious. It was just simply that they were left over when DeLorean went bankrupt, and Lapple was owed money, and they were trying to get some money back. And the best price they got was from a scrapyard, who then sold them to the fisheries. So they didn't actually sell it straight to the fisheries; they sold it to a scrapyard, and then the scrapyard sold them to the fishery company.
Is there, like, in the industry, like, how long do dies get kept? Obviously DeLorean went out of business, but if I go make a car, how long do they keep the dies before they decide that's it? We're not stamping any more fenders or whatever.
I get a lot of cars. There's factories in China that will then continue to make parts, and they'll actually make their own dies to do that. I don't really know.
I know that Volkswagen did that, or they sold the the microbus dies to like Mexico, then they sold them to Brazil and stuff like that. But if they wear out, I didn't know, like, how long can you use them? If they wear out, then
Yeah, who knows? I don't know.
Oh, one more. Did they ever have to make another die for any of these things? Like, were they making enough DeLoreans long enough to wear out any of them?
Yeah, they would be. So what Michael was saying was they were constantly repairing the dies, so they would get worn pretty quickly, and they'd have to. I don't really know what was involved in repairing them. Maybe they'd have to weld them and grind it back and polish it again, things like that. And then they had a lot of running changes in the panels as well, like moving piercings in the panels to different places, and like even the gas flap hood or the pleats in the hood and things like that.
Do you think the hood changes were new dies made, or they modified the existing dies to delete those features?
I don't know.
Okay, I didn't know if it was mentioned.
Your guess is as good as mine there.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I guess they probably modified it, right? Because these things are huge, right?
Yeah.
They probably just welded in the seam that would been creating that impression and just ground it flat there.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that's cheaper than building an entire new die.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That guy store any other panels in his house, or was he just partial to the DeLorean?
No, he just kept his DeLorean ones. Yeah, so he one of the other cars that were built in the factory in Carlo was the Ford Transit van. The European model, I don't know if it's the same as the one that you guys have over here, but yeah, I remember joking with Michael that I think I was the first person to ever knock on his door and ask him about the history of his job at Lapple, right? And he said he's never had anybody who has a keen interest in Ford Transit vans asking him to share his
Right.
story. Then, so. But yeah, he's a super nice guy. And I was, delighted to have met him, but also, I mean, it's really cool to have these things. I need to figure a way of, I guess, better displaying them. I usually just kind of have them in storage in the basement. I think I need to figure out a way of hanging them on the wall somehow, but they're really awkward to hang because of the shape of a golden door. If it was a regular car, it'd be easier, right? You could just, more 2D kind of thing, you could just hang up on the wall. But,
I imagine they're sharp as hell too, right? I mean, the doors already, when they were made, they were sharp. If you ever have to work in them, they're sharp. I imagine all of the pieces that aren't outside of it are really sharp.
I was considering wearing gloves for this demonstration just in case.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for putting yourself at risk for us.
Well, thanks, John, for presenting and sharing the history with us and your new projects. I'll just wrap this up and stop the recording. If anyone wants to stay on for just some casual chat, you're welcome to. Otherwise, thanks everyone for attending.
Thanks.